Hey, welcome everyone, and welcome to those on joining us on Facebook Live as well. It is 6:30, so we'll go ahead and get started. It's my pleasure to welcome you to Northern Kentucky History Hour. I'm your host for tonight, Heather Cook, and I'm joining you from my home in Cincinnati, Ohio. And with the power of Zoom, our presenter, Karen Zengel, is also joining us. So thank you, Karen. Northern Kentucky History Hour is a project of the Behringer-Crawford Museum, Northern Kentucky's History Museum, that would not be possible without support. We'd like to thank all of our sponsors, including the City of Covington, Kenton County Fiscal Court, ArtsWave, Kentucky Arts Council, Northern Kentucky Sports Hall of Fame, the Carol Ann and Ralph V. Hale Jr. Foundation, and our members. If you're not yet a member of the museum, please consider joining for access to discounts and exclusive programming. You can learn more and join at our website, which is bcmuseum.org. We would love to hear from our viewers tonight, so if you have a question or comment to share, you can type it in the chat or the Q&A feature, and I will get to those immediately following the end of the presentation. So let's meet tonight's speaker. Karen Zengel is the Executive Director for St. Vincent de Paul, Northern Kentucky. After 18 years in market research, she made the transition to St. Vincent de Paul in 2017, ready to use her skill set from the professional world to help others within her community. As an active member of the Northern Kentucky Safety Net Executive Committee, Zengel thrives on leveraging the unique gifts of individuals to maximize their impact through partnerships and collaboration. Zengel lives in Alexandria, Kentucky with her husband, Don, and 3 children. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Before we get started, there is a quiz question. The first respondent to answer a correct answer in the chat on Zoom or on Facebook Live wins a Northern Kentucky History Hour prize, and most importantly, bragging rights. So tonight's question is, which Diocese of Covington parish was the first parish to host a St. Vincent de Paul Society conference? So, okay, Karen, if you are ready, you can go ahead and get started.
Thank you, Heather, for that introduction, and thanks to everyone who's joined us this evening. I understand this is the 100th episode of the Northern Kentucky History Hour, and we just happen to be celebrating 100 years of existence in Northern Kentucky as St. Vincent de Paul. And so we are honored to be here, and we can't wait to share our story with you tonight. So let's go ahead and get started. Before we start talking about Northern Kentucky St. Vincent de Paul, we thought it would be helpful to share a little bit of international history for everyone. So the Society of St. Vincent de Paul was not actually founded by St. Vincent de Paul. It was founded by a young college student named Frederick Ozanam, and it was founded in 1833. Frederick was a devout Catholic and also a very committed scholar. He enjoyed a good debate, and he was known for his well-thought-out arguments for the problems that faced his time. Much of what Frederick talked about and then ultimately wrote about can be found in the basic social justice tenets later introduced by Pope Leo in the 1890s. These tenets proclaim that it is our responsibility to build a just society and live lives of holiness amidst the challenges that we face in modern society. And I think that still holds true today. So as a young student at the Sorbonne, living in a time of political, social, religious, and economic turmoil in 19th century France, Frederick Ozanam was appalled by the conditions he saw in Paris. And he talked about it a lot. At a student meeting, another student challenged Frederick Ozanam and other practicing Catholics, admitting that while the Catholic Church had, talked a lot about what needed to be done within the society, he wasn't really seeing a lot of action. In fact, his direct challenge to Frederick was, what do you do besides talk to prove the faith you claim is in you? So, like most young men, 18, 19, 20 years old, Frederick took that challenge to heart. He got together a group of 5 other friends, and they decided to found the first conference of charity to assist the poor in the streets of Paris. It was led by a man named Emmanuel Bailey as their first president, who was a married layman in his late 30s and intended to really be a mentor for those young men. And later, after they started serving, they decided to name the society after the patron saint of charity, St. Vincent de Paul. So let's talk a little bit about St. Vincent de Paul so that you can also understand why the society was named after him. So St. Vincent de Paul was born to a peasant family in France in the 1850s or 1580s. Although he later achieved fame for his dedication to the poor, his early life was spent attempting to escape his humble roots. His family shared in his ambition, hoping that a career in the priesthood would better the family fortune. He became a priest at the young age of 19, and he spent most of his early priesthood mingling with members of the elite. He was very well liked because he was charming, intelligent, and had a sense of humor. In 1605, Vincent was returning home by boat from a trip, and he was captured by pirates. He was actually in slavery, held by those pirates for 2 years. During this time, he prayed to God, telling him that if his life could be spared and he was freed, he would devote the rest of his life to serve the poor. Eventually, he did escape, and he served a church in rural France. The poverty that he had found there shocked him, and it was not uncommon for people who were not able to find work to die from starvation. So, as we mentioned, Frederick worked among the wealthy early in his priesthood, and so he took stock of his resources and his former connections with the wealthy, and he influenced and led them to come together in financial assistance to help the poor. He convinced them to collect clothing, food, and other items of need to help those in need. So Frederick was a great organizer. After this, he also founded other charity organizations listed here. And then that laid the foundation for the church's modern day role in services for the poor. Another person of influence important to the Society of St. Vincent de Paul is Blessed Rosalie Rondeau. So she was a daughter of charity and brought up in the Vincentian charism, and she served in the Mouffetard area of Paris. Her job was to mentor those 5 young college students in visiting the poor. She taught them to be kind and love, for love is your first gift to the poor. They will appreciate your kindness and your love more than anything else that you can bring to them. And that precept continues to hold true today in the service of St. Vincent de Paul. So the Society's work began in Paris's Mouffetard district, which was one of the poorest parts at the time. Now here we are in 2023, present in 140 countries around the world, with over 800,000 people serving worldwide, dedicated to the Society of St. Vincent de Paul. Frederick's dream was to embrace the world in a network of charity, and that dream has certainly come true. So, 1833 is when the Society started in Paris. In 1845, the Society started in the United States. And the first city where St. Vincent de Paul existed within the US was in St. Louis. It was formally recognized by the International Council in Paris in 1846. And now within the United States alone, there are almost 90,000 volunteers who work in over 4,400 conferences, which are those parish volunteer groups that we'll talk about in a bit. So before we get into Northern Kentucky, we wanted to share our mission statement. And that mission statement is that the Society of St. Vincent de Paul is a network of friends growing in holiness and building a more just world through personal relationships with service to people in need. If we break this down into a more practical way of thinking, we've tasked ourselves to provide for the basic needs of our neighbors who are struggling. As we'll talk later, this takes the form of emergency financial assistance and basic needs such as food, clothing, and furniture. However, at the root, just like our forefathers of the society, we strive to invite others to serve their neighbors. And so that's why when we read our mission statement, we put a lot of emphasis on the idea of a network of friends and personal relationships. We live in community and in relationship to let those around us in a less fortunate situation know that they are never alone in their struggles. We often say that one can survive without material goods, but you cannot survive without hope for a better day. None of the work that we do could be done without the Vincentians, who are those volunteers and those neighbors who have made the commitment to serve. And they do this as an opportunity to know Christ, to see him through the suffering of others, to help carry the cross that so many may encounter within their lives. Now, the structure of St. Vincent de Paul, I'm going to use a few terms throughout that I wanted to make sure everyone understood. First of all, the society is organized into conferences, and those conferences are basically groups of volunteers who've come together associated with a specific Catholic parish, and they're made up of volunteers that call themselves Vincentians. Within a conference, the work is being done within the own neighborhood associated with that parish. And so if you live in Covington and you go to Cathedral Basilica and you're part of that conference associated with that parish, you're visiting other people who live near the cathedral within Covington. That's the basis of the work of St. Vincent de Paul at the conference level. Now, groups of conferences can combine into a council, and that's representative of the diocese in which they exist. And that's where several parishes will come together and pool resources to address some of the common needs that they might see when they go out and visit those who are less fortunate within their communities. So there are three essential elements of being a Vincentian: friendship, service, and spirituality. And these are important, again, because of the network of friends and the relationship component associated with being part of St. Vincent de Paul. Frederick Ozanam once observed that we become closer to friends after sharing an activity with them, such as going for a walk or eating dinner. He said, "But if purely human acts have this power, moral acts have it even more. And if two or three come together to do good, their union will be perfect." He went on to remind us that our visits to the poor are at least equally for them as for ourselves, so as to become progressively better friends. Service is the next component, and it's animated by our spirituality. We don't simply offer philanthropy or volunteerism. Instead, we seek to draw nearer to Christ, serving him and the poor and one another. Our ideal is to relieve suffering for love alone, just like the quote that Blessed Rosalie Rondeau had shared with the gentleman back in the 1830s. Finally, just as our service is an expression of our spirituality, that spirituality is itself a call to both service and to friendship. We love God, in St. Vincent's words, with the strength of our arms and the sweat of our brows. We are members of conferences, which are genuine communities of faith and love, of prayer and action. This is how those three essential elements come together in the work of St. Vincent de Paul. It's also important to understand that the home visit is the hallmark of St. Vincent de Paul. I'm definitely going to talk about the thrift stores later. I think a lot of people within our community think about the thrift stores first whenever they think of St. Vincent de Paul. But it's really about the conferences and the Vincentians who are doing the work and visiting the poor that make up St. Vincent de Paul. And the way that that happens is in the form of a home visit, where volunteers will literally go to their neighbors' homes and check in on them and find out how we can help. That is our hallmark. And so the home visits gives the Vincentian the opportunity to not only provide and comfort our neighbors, but better understand their circumstances and struggles. They also give our neighbors in need home field advantage so that they may feel comfortable confiding their stories because we go to them. And then finally, connecting with a client is a powerful experience for a Vincentian. It is through these person-to-person experiences that we are blessed to serve and we witness the face of Christ. Okay, so let's talk about Northern Kentucky. Thanks for hanging with me here. Okay. So, the Society of St. Vincent de Paul, our Northern Kentucky Council, was officially founded in 1923. What we're sharing here is a picture of the application for institution for St. Vincent de Paul within the United States of America. You can see that Ed Tracy was our president at the time, and he was an attorney from Fort Mitchell. Henry Grody was the vice president, and then C.C. Wolf played both the role of secretary and treasurer. What's interesting is that even before we were formally recognized as a society within the United States, we had parish-based conferences that began even earlier than 1923. What I'm sharing here is a picture of a report that was accompanied by a letter to the bishop of the time, explaining the work that had been done on an informal basis among the different parishes in Newport. Through a combination of donations and a very successful fundraiser in the form of a euchre tournament, this group of people was able to raise $682 to provide for the basic needs of the poor within their neighborhood. The types of assistance that we provided is noted here, and not that much different from what the society shares today with those in need. I found coal particularly interesting as a sign of the time, 27 orders of coal. It's not uncommon for us today to often pay for utility assistance to help keep the lights on and to keep families warm. Back in the early 1900s, people used coal to keep themselves warm. Back in the early 1900s, we also helped in this particular report provide a sewing machine that cost $4 to help a family make their own clothing. The total cost of all of these assistant expenditures was $666.50. It provided a small surplus for the first documented year of assistance and gave the folks who were part of this service hope to continue and go on to serve their neighbors in need. Our first official Society of St. Vincent de Paul conferences that were recognized by St. Vincent de Paul in the United States are Holy Cross, Mother of God, and Blessed Sacrament. Holy Cross submitted their application in January of 2023. Mother of God submitted theirs in February of 2023, and Blessed Sacrament submitted theirs in March 2023. Today, we have 31 conferences represented in Northern Kentucky. You can see that it's interesting to see how, as the conferences with the years of their founding here next to them developed, it really does follow the pattern of how our population has grown within Northern Kentucky. Some of our earliest conferences, Divine Mercy here in 1925, St. Bernard in 1931, our three founding conferences right here, St. Benedict, St. Augustine. These are all within Covington, Newport, and those river cities where the concentration of the population lived during that time. You can see even more recently, though, our Western Conference, our Western District, which includes those conferences associated primarily with our Boone County neighbors, how they were formed much later and represent just how the population has grown over time. There are now more than 600 Vincentians across these 31 conferences who have made this commitment to serve their neighbors in need. As we mentioned before, the work would not happen without our Vincentians, which is why we can never stop encouraging parishes to begin their own ministries. In the last several years, we've dedicated a position at the council focused on revitalization and expansion to continue growing to meet the need. You can see that we have a new conference as early as this year in St. Pius in 2023, as well as some new conferences in more rural areas of St. Augustine, St. James, which is Bracken County in 2021, and St. Joseph Camp Springs in 2022. As our diocese has changed within Covington, so have some of the conferences and where they've served. And so, unfortunately, we have had a few conferences and groups that have either closed or merged with others, in other parishes where they may no longer be active. So the closed and merged conferences here on the left represent many of the parishes that we've had to close within the Diocese of Covington in the first place. And then on the right are those inactive conferences that may have decided not to continue the ministry and started working with another parish nearby to serve the areas where they live. So this is a timeline of how our ministry has evolved. And as you can see, over time, programs were added to address the needs that our Vincentians observed on their home visits. These programs were founded on ideas of how we could pool resources to address common needs instead of attacking the need on an individual conference level. These are the types of things that a council would concentrate on. And we have a small staff that helps monitor these programs and make sure that those resources are not available. We'll talk more about these programs as we continue to head through the presentation. So the first program that we're going to talk about are the St. Vincent de Paul thrift stores. And we're going to talk about a gentleman named Andrew Loneman, who was the first executive director for the St. Vincent de Paul thrift stores. I'm going to read to you an excerpt from the Kenton County Historical Society that was published in 2009 to tell you more about the story of Andrew Loneman. It was a cold January day in 1946 as Andrew Loneman began a new job armed with a gallon of paint, a hammer, some nails, and some plywood. He was working at 1132 Greenup Street at the bidding of Father Ed Klosterman, the pastor of Mother of God Church, who asked Andrew to set up a salvage bureau for the St. Vincent de Paul Society and operate it. The society was interested in establishing a store where contributions could be sorted, displayed, and sold or distributed in an organized way. They needed a person who would devote his full time to the project. The priest offered Loneman the job, and after much contemplation, Andrew accepted. A quote from Mr. Loneman said, "I had an offer to become a tenor in a professional quartet, and I was real excited until I found out I would have to be on the road about 6 months of the year." He thought a long time before making that decision to accept Father Klosterman's request. Even though singing was his dream, a voice inside him was telling him his place was at home with his young family. We recently had the opportunity to speak with Mr. Loneman's two daughters who told us this story, and how that they were obviously their lives were changed forever because their dad decided to stay home and run the St. Vincent de Paul thrift stores. But he also had a huge impact on St. Vincent de Paul within Northern Kentucky. And so we're very blessed that he made this life decision to be the forefather of St. Vincent de Paul thrift stores in Northern Kentucky. So the first store opened in Covington on Greenup Street. And the way that it started is that there were 11 parish conferences that came together, and they contributed $1,650 dedicated to opening the store. Within 1 year, this first store recouped its opening costs and provided support to St. Vincent de Paul's ministry. One of the things that Mr. Loneman had said is that he wanted to make sure that the stores were set up in such a way that a person who was coming to the stores out of need would feel good about coming to the stores, that it should be clean and organized, easy to find things. And this idea that to choose your own items, even if it may be a secondhand item, is a source of dignity. And that is something that still remains true for us today in our St. Vincent de Paul stores. As the success of the operation continued to grow, so did the number of employees. And so a truck driver for pickup and deliveries was added, a retired bookkeeper was also added, and several sales ladies were soon added within those first few years of the stores being open. Okay. So this slide shares the history of the stores, and there have been several stores throughout Northern Kentucky since that 1946 first store that opened on Greenup Street here. Soon thereafter, there was a store that opened in Newport on 9th and Putnam. Then there was another store that had opened in Covington on Pike Street. And now when I meet shoppers within the store, even on Crescent Springs Pike today, I have people who remember that Pike Street store fondly and tell stories about how they used to visit that Pike Street store when they were young as well. In the 1950s, we opened a store in Dayton. In 1965, the Newport store moved from 9th and Putnam to 9th and Monmouth, which I think a lot of people probably continue to remember this store as well. In 1969, we moved our headquarters for the thrift store to Crescent Springs Pike, which is where our headquarters continues to exist today, and we'll talk a little bit more about this later. A storefront was added to Crescent Springs Pike in 1971. At first, it was just a warehouse. In 1995, there was a store in Latonia and in Ludlow. In 1998, a store had opened in Falmouth, and it continues to operate today. In 2006, we operated a small store in Carrollton. And then in 2014, we opened a store in Florence. And then in 2021, our newest store operates in Cold Spring. Today, just the Crescent Springs store, the Barclay Street store in Falmouth, Florence, and Cold Spring continue to exist. And now those 4 stores employ over 80 people. So, talking about the Crescent Springs stores, which seems to be legendary, it is our largest store in terms of the number of visitors who come and see us. It is also the headquarters for St. Vincent de Paul. So in addition to that donation center and the store, there are some offices in the back of that building that house staff who help support all the programs that are provided as part of the outreach for St. Vincent de Paul. But the store in Crescent Springs Pike was part of a gift that was provided to St. Vincent de Paul by the Butler family in 1969. And the idea at the time is that these smaller stores really didn't have the space to be able, or the capacity to be able to keep all of the material donations that were being made to St. Vincent de Paul. We really needed a warehouse to organize those donations. So in 1969, we began, I should say, warehouse operation at Crescent Springs Pike. And this is the dedication ceremony a picture of the dedication ceremony that happened at that point in time. And then in 1971, we decided to add some retail space, and the storefront was added to the warehouse. Over time, as some of those smaller stores had closed in Covington, and we needed more retail space within Erlanger or Crescent Springs because of the demand and the need that we faced, we borrowed some of that warehouse space from the warehouse to store those donations and made it into a larger retail space, very similar to what you see today when you go and visit that store. The other interesting thing about this particular location was that as those smaller stores closed and the office spaces associated with those stores closed, we needed to make more room for offices for the folks who were helping to support our Vincentians. in that Crescent Springs store. So at any point, if you ever would like a tour of our headquarters, I'm always happy to give those tours and share more about the evolution of how our complete operations is run from that location, where we, as we added a new program and we needed a new teammate, we would add a new office. And so we have maximized every inch within that facility, and it has definitely served us well in the time that we've been in that location. So as I mentioned a little bit earlier, today we have 4 convenience store locations in Erlanger, Florence, Cold Spring, and Falmouth. And I always use Erlanger and Crescent Springs interchangeably. Today our thrift stores provide for 70% of our ministry's outreach in terms of the revenue that it's able to generate for us. It supports many different programs that we'll continue to talk about, and it provides employment to roughly 80 people. 3 of those 4 stores offer a larger retail footprint of about 8,000 square feet, which is recommended by the Society of St. Vincent de Paul. Our Falmouth store is a smaller store at less than 2,000 square feet, but it feels like it's enough to provide a nice selection for our neighbors who live in Pendleton County. As mentioned earlier, as the stores expanded, we did decide to purchase trucks to provide for pickups and deliveries to our customers. And currently we operate a fleet of 3 trucks that pick up material donations from homes. They deliver furniture to neighbors in need. They pick up donations from the 9 blue bins that are throughout Northern Kentucky. And they also help us shuttle resources and inventories between our 4 stores. Finally, these trucks come in handy whenever different organizations within our community choose to do charitable drives. We have huge food drives that happen every fall that we could not, that we wouldn't be able to accommodate without our wonderful truck drivers and our fleet of trucks. And our trucks drive about 3,500 miles a month across our region to help support the ministry in many different ways. So another interesting development that happened over time is on our timeline. You might have noticed that in 1980, we indicated on the timeline that women are welcome. Prior to 1980, although women were involved, we do know they were not officially recognized as Vincentians within the Society of St. Vincent de Paul. And so this is an article from the Messenger back at that time. And it talks about a meeting that happened in January, the first President's Dinner of the Society that welcomed 18 women who have made the commitment to become Vincentian and serve their neighbors in need. We do know that prior to this, women were involved within the society. Carol and Andrea Loneman, Mr. Loneman's children, when in the interview with them, they shared that they remember their mom laundering and ironing clothes for the thrift store very early on. So women have always been active in the Society of St. Vincent de Paul within Northern Kentucky, but they weren't necessarily formally recognized until 1980. So as I mentioned, we have multiple programs that have developed over time, thanks to the insight of our Vincentians when they go and visit our neighbors in need. Financial assistance in the form of rent and utilities is our single largest expense in terms of helping those in need. Neighbors run into unexpected expenses that may keep them from being able to meet their monthly obligations. Someone may fall ill, and it makes it difficult if they've missed work to be able to just pay their rent and utilities. And St. Vincent de Paul has always been there to be able to provide that level of assistance. We also operate 27 food pantries throughout Northern Kentucky. We have 3 food pantries that are operated on a larger scale from our council. There is one in the Crescent Springs warehouse. There is one in Cold Spring, and there is one in Falmouth. And then we have 24 conferences, parishes who also operate their own pantries. We've talked about the thrift stores and donation centers. We have a homeless assistance program now that provides short-term hotel stays for neighbors in need. We have a Sweet Dreams bed program, Summer Breeze heat relief that we'll talk a little bit more about, a microloan program, winter coat, Christmas joy, medical loan closet, and then finally Voice of the Poor, which is an advocacy team who works hard to make sure that our Vincentians in our community are kept informed about some of the struggles and systemic challenges that they're facing, and that we might be able to advocate on behalf of those who may not have a voice. All of these programs have evolved over time. They were not, rent and utilities, I think, was always there, as you can see from the coal that we provided back in the early 1900s, as was food. But the other things came out of need based on the observations of our Vincentian home visitors going out to visit our neighbors. The other thing that Frederick Ozanam had said early on is that there is no act of charity that is foreign to the society. And I think that the evolution of our programming and the work that we've done throughout the year certainly make that claim true. And that if there's a problem, we use creativity, we come together with our community to try to find a solution and address the issue. So when a person needs help from St. Vincent de Paul, we have a call center, and an individual can call this number. It's 859-341-3219. And we have volunteers on the other end who pick up the phone and listen to some of the struggles that person might be facing, take down some basic information, enter that into a software program that then sends an email to that parish conference that's in the area where that neighbor lives. That is the beginning of how a home visit is set up for a neighbor in need. And so we're always grateful to those volunteers who fill the seats in our call center, which actually you can even do remotely now. Since COVID, we've been able to figure out a way to forward phone calls to volunteers' homes if they are not comfortable to come in and take those calls, and be able to be that voice and that listening ear on the other line when somebody is going through a struggle. And this is just the shot of a home visit between some Vincentians calling on someone who may have called in need, and having that face-to-face personal experience to listen and find out how we can help. It's a wonderful picture of our Vincentians at St. Barbara's in Erlanger and within their food pantry. And then we wanted to share a little bit about our Sweet Dreams bed program. So the Sweet Dreams bed program started back in 1998. And we provide beds to the children, the elderly, and the disabled. And the reason why we needed to start to do this is that you know that you don't function well when you don't get a good night's sleep. And our Vincentians were going on these home visits and seeing that there were folks who were sleeping on the floor or in chairs or on couches. And that was particularly problematic for young kids. And so we made the decision to seek out some funding for this program that provides beds so that a person can get a healthy night's sleep and be able to take care of themselves. Another program that was recognized through the home visit is our summer heat relief program. Vincentians were noticing when they went out on home visits that some folks did not have a way to cool off their space, their homes, in the summer. And so we have more recently worked together with St. Elizabeth Healthcare to sponsor this program that provides air conditioners to someone with a medical condition, or a fan to anyone in need of heat relief. This program started back in the year 2000 and has continued to run. In the last 2 years, St. Elizabeth has been our generous sponsor, along with some other foundations who've helped us with funding to make sure that this program can continue to provide relief to those who might be suffering, especially from a chronic health condition. Last year, we provided 387 fans and air conditioners to neighbors in Northern Kentucky, and we're the only annual heat relief program in Northern Kentucky. We also wanted to speak about something that we want to call the out-of-area conference. So we mentioned earlier that 31 of the 54 parishes within the Diocese of Covington have a conference, a group of volunteers who go out and visit the folks that live within their parish boundaries who may have reached out in need. However, we also know that there are some areas that are not covered. And actually, Newport is one of those areas where we don't currently have an active conference. And so during COVID, when there was significant need and there was a lot of anxiety, especially around those who were in the restaurant industry, about how they were going to be able to, how they were going to be paid and how they were going to be able to pay their bills, that we were seeing a significant increase in the need for help in those uncovered areas. So, no active charity is foreign to the society. A group of our Vincentians noticed this, and they decided to come together from across multiple parishes to make the commitment to assist those who live in areas where we may not have a conference. And that continues now, even post-COVID. The need continues to be great. And we are so blessed by that group of Vincentians and new Vincentians who have joined them since the COVID pandemic to continue to serve in those areas where we may not have an active conference. Our community impact last year was significant. Rent and utility assistance at $781,000. That kept 6,400 neighbors safely housed. Without that rent and utility assistance, those folks would have been in danger of losing their homes. So we are blessed to be able to have provided that level of assistance. 22,000 people were fed through our network of 27 pantries. We provided 350 nights of shelter for the homeless, 780 beds, and $219,000 in clothing, furniture, and housewares provided at no cost to our neighbors in need. These basic needs are important to providing hope for those who might be struggling within our community. And that need continues to be great this year, with rent and utility assistance on pace to be over $900,000 by the end of the year. We are so grateful to all those folks out there who have made the commitment to be a Vincentian, who have made the commitment to support us in some way, either through your material donations or financial donations, so that we can provide hope to those who might be struggling to make ends meet. So we talk a lot about how we serve our neighbors, but we have to remember that our neighbors aren't necessarily always those people who are right next door. It could be anyone in need. And one of the things that St. Vincent de Paul also does and has done in the past is has reached out to areas that, may be in a situation where they require some extra help. And one example such as this is the flood of 1957 in Kentucky. And so this is in Hazard, Kentucky, where we were able to pull together donations of clothing and furniture and food. You can see that we have our truck here that we loaded up. Here's Mr. Loneman within that picture, and volunteers who helped us take all of these goods to Hazard, Kentucky to distribute and help those victims of the flood. That theme continues to hold true even today, where more recently we've helped with the Eastern Kentucky flood survivors. And we've sent groups of Vincentians who've gone down and helped clean up the area, have helped repair homes, and help those families who may have had their lives upended by that horrific flooding. Again, just sharing love with them, being there for them, and reminding them that we want to give help where it is needed most. So that's the basic story of St. Vincent de Paul, where we strive to meet basic needs through this person-to-person service. Home visits is our hallmark. We provide those basic needs, but really no act of charity is foreign to the society. And we feel blessed to serve thanks to the support of our community. And we are happy to be able to continue to serve for the next 100 years. And thank you. That concludes the presentation. If anyone has any questions, you can feel free to ask.
Yeah, we did have a couple questions come in, but we'd like to start with the trivia question. Just to remind everyone, that question was, which Diocese of Covington parish was the first parish to host a St. Vincent de Paul Society conference? And that answer was Holy Cross in Latonia, and we did have a winner. It was on Facebook Live, Patty Kaiser. So congratulations, Patty. You will be getting your prize in the mail. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that, if you have anything to say about that answer, that parish.
Well, Holy Cross continues to be a very active parish. It was the first groundbreaking official, we'll say, because we know that there was work being done in Newport prior to 1923. You know, Holy Cross is there within Latonia and served some of the poorer parts of Covington early on. And so we're lucky that they decided to take that first step, because it really was the beginning of something much bigger within Northern Kentucky.
So I guess we'll get into the questions. The first one was that somebody had heard that St. Vincent de Paul once used to they use textiles that are not sellable because they have rips or tears, but that they sell them by the pound, and wanted to know if that was correct.
That's right. Thank you for reminding me, because I did want to mention that on one of the slides. And so, you know, we receive material donations, and sometimes, you know, if something is ripped, torn, or stained, that we wouldn't want to put it out onto that retail floor for someone to choose to purchase or buy on a voucher. We do resell that in bulk. Overseas primarily, that can be sold for rags for pennies on the pound. That also serves as a source of revenue for us. And so about 130,000 pounds a month is sold in bulk overseas, which results in about $400,000 in revenue to St. Vincent de Paul to help support those programs that I had mentioned earlier. And so we always tell folks that when you're cleaning out your closets, if you feel like, oh, nobody's going to want this t-shirt, give it to us anyway, because we'll take it. We're able to use it, and that turns into additional source of revenue for St. Vincent de Paul to provide for our neighbors in need.
And someone else asked if the Brighton Center's strong presence or influence offset the absence of St. Vincent de Paul in Newport.
We work very closely together with Brighton Center. So often we check first with Brighton Center to see if they have funding to be able to support the neighbors of Newport. If they are not able to take on that request, then St. Vincent de Paul typically does take on that request. But we work hand in hand with Brighton Center. I think Brighton Center having an active food pantry right there in downtown Newport is very helpful to us. But the rent and utility assistance is often an area where we end up partnering quite a bit because of the different sources of funding.
We do have quite a few comments saying what a great presentation it was and thanking you. But that is all the questions we have right now. So if anybody has more questions, we do have some more time if you want to get those in. In the meantime, is there anything else you would like to touch on a little bit?
I just want to thank everyone who took the time to join us thanks for listening to our story. Thanks for supporting us in any, in any way. We are truly blessed to serve, and we couldn't do that without the wonderful community of Northern Kentucky. And so we're so happy to be able to be here for 100 years, and we plan to be here for another 100 years.
What made you want to join the St. Vincent de Paul community?
Yeah, so I had spent quite a bit of time in corporate America, and I think I know I was at a point in my life where I was seeking to grow my own faith, and I had done quite a bit of representation for the company I worked for when it came to like nonprofit fundraising, and that appealed to me. And I saw how they used data and information, and nonprofits are businesses just like those corporate entities, right? And so I felt like I had an opportunity when I saw the job for St. Vincent de Paul come up, with the help of my husband looking for, who saw it actually before I saw it, and said, hey, this sounds great. This is a Catholic organization that's seeking a person who has business experience. Maybe you should apply. It gives you a chance to live your faith in the work that you do every day. And there aren't very many people who get that opportunity. And so I wasn't sure if I was ready for something like that yet. But he said, just try it, just go in the interview and see how it goes. And so I did, and I love the people that I met in that first interview. I learned a lot in that first interview. I learned that St. Vincent de Paul was more than a thrift store, for sure. So much happening within the organization, and it is truly the opportunity to see the face of Christ every day. So the next interview went really well, and I was offered the job, and I had prayed about it, and it was definitely the right step for myself personally and for our family. And I just love getting to see the miracles that happen every day. There are miracles that happen every day. I have to tell you that just when you think it's not possible to address a certain issue or challenge that comes up, you meet somebody within the network of St. Vincent de Paul, or within the network of our community, who has a suggestion or a way to address that challenge, and the pieces just fall into place. We have so many Vinny moments, is what we call them. And so it has been a wonderful faith building experience, and I'm happy that it gets to be my career.
Yeah, that's so cool that you get to do that and experience that within your work that you do. It doesn't look like we have any more questions, and it is pretty close to 7:30, so I guess we could go ahead and wrap up if you want to stop sharing your screen. Okay, so we do have a new exhibit display called Dancing with Nature. It is a wildlife photography exhibit of the natural world in Northern Kentucky through the lens of Kira McNeil, featuring herons, starlings, deer, butterflies, spiders, and praying mantis, and more. The photographs are all framed with salvaged, repurposed wood from old structures on her farm, and the exhibit will be on display through August 13th. Also on display is the Art of Fashion, Faye Applegarth Maddox, featuring one-of-a-kind illustrations and advertising in local newspapers from 1945 to 1965 by a Northern Kentucky fashion plate artist. The elaborate drawings were used for Reeds of Hyde Park, McAlpin's, Mabley and Carew, Pogues, Shillitoes, Tall Fashions, and McPerth Sportswear, and more. And Music at BCM is back. Our next concert is tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. with Danny Frazier Band. A Northern Kentucky Music Legends Hall of Fame inductee, Frazier returns to the Music at BCM stage, keeping it country. Doors open at 6 p.m. Please bring chairs or blankets for seating. In case of rain, we will move indoors. The following concert will be on July 20th with Blue 80. Be sure to check out the complete Music at BCM schedule on our website at bcmuseum.org. Lastly, our next Northern Kentucky History Hour will be on Wednesday, July 26th, with Janine Kreinbrink presenting on the Big Bone Lick State Historic Site, the birthplace of vertebrate paleontology, national honors and accolades. So please tune in for that. And for more Northern Kentucky history through the week, you can check out our Facebook page and our YouTube channel, where you can find the latest curators chat along with all of our past Northern Kentucky History Hour presentations. They are all also available on our YouTube channel, which is at BC Museum. Please like and subscribe. And that's all we have time for this evening. Thank you again to all of our sponsors and supporters of BCM. Until then, take care, everyone, and good night. Thanks, everyone.